It was a mean time, a time for mean heroes. Heroes like Mike Hammer.
You almost wrecked my car. Well? Get in.
Pulp fiction private eye Mike Hammer was the creation of a former lifeguard and fighter pilot from Brooklyn, who became the most popular writer of the 1950s.
I always said I was a chewing gum of American literature, which I am. I'm not a detective writer. I'm a mystery writer. Now, Earl Stanley Gardner was a detective writer. He did everything by the book and in good notes. He was a great writer, but he had a different style. My style went into, I had a lot of sex, violence, and love, emotional stuff, and I didn't stay quite to the pattern that they had.
I squeezed until my fingers were buried in the flesh of his throat, and his hands clawed at my arm frantically, trying to tear me away. I held him down until he was on his knees, and dead as he was ever gonna be.
He wouldn't have reached his peak of popularity if Splain hadn't been a very good writer. I think Splain was a writer of enormous energy and invention. But he was driven by the ethos of the period, which was an anti-communist ethos. So Mike Hammer was the ultimate sort of John Wayne hero in a way. You know, the hell with the subpoenas, the hell with the Constitution, particularly the hell with the Constitution, the hell with the Fifth Amendment. If you're a commie, I'm going to shoot you right between the eyes or give you a real good beating on the way.
Where's Bella? Where is she? Where is she? Where is she? Where is she?
Mike Hammer was a steely enforcer whose mission was to exterminate those who would destroy America from within or without.
There was a moment when Mickey turned away from your run-of-the-mill bad guys and rats and things to go after commie rats and things, and I think Spillane writes, they were commies. They were real sons of bitches who should have died long ago. They never thought there were people like me in this country. Great stuff.
Spillane's books sold on a winning formula of commie bashing, sex, and violence. An explosion in paperback publishing technology made it possible to turn out millions of inexpensive books quickly. That meant Spillane's novels were available and cheap. Critics charged that Spillane was exciting the country's vigilante streak. He was called a dangerous paranoid. His creation, Mike Hammer, a sadistic misfit.
I went to a tea party, and at the tea party were all these funny little people that read books and whatnot. So this guy came up to me, a little bitty guy. He said, now, this is what he said to me. I can still remember the words, like I'm hearing them from the day when they come out of his mouth. He says, what a terrible commentary on the reading habits of the American public to think that you have 7 out of the top 10 of all-time bestsellers. I said, oh, shut up. You're lucky I didn't write 3 more. Then I did, and they had to change the category out of that 15 out of the top 25.
For an author who once wrote comic books for a living, Mickey Spillane had come a long way. By 1953, his books had sold over 17 million copies. The man who denied any conscious attempt to cash in on the anti-communist hysteria of the day was on his way to becoming one of the best-selling American writers of all time. But even Mickey Spillane's Mike Hammer was no match for the atomic demons that haunted the American psyche.
Lucky Strike presents Your Hit Parade.
In 1950, Your Hit Parade made its debut on the infant medium of television. 100 stations across the country now brought TV into 8 million American homes. Entering the American language were the words heliport, captive audience, and for products designed by women, femineered. In Boston, masked gunmen stole a record $2.8 million from the Brinks Express Company. The FBI, believing the robbery to be a communist conspiracy, would spend 6 years and $129 million solving the case. Days were numbered for elevator operators across the country when the Otis Elevator Company began installing a new passenger lift with automatic doors. A door opened for Althea Gibson, who became the first black American to participate in a major U.S. tennis tournament. In that same year, the Cold War turned hot. On June 25, 1950, troops from communist North Korea poured across the border at the 38th parallel and attacked the non-communist South. Fire! 5 short years after the end of World War II, America led United Nations forces against the army of North Korean dictator Kim Il-sung. For most of the world, the war was the first test of the new United Nations. To Americans, the Korean War was about one thing: containing communism. One of the first reporters at the battlefront was a young correspondent for Time magazine, Frank Gibney.
We stayed with one of our friends, an Army colonel, who woke us in the middle of the night and said, "They've broken through, head south." We got ferried across the Han River with the help of some Korean soldiers. And as we're going further south, then we suddenly saw a couple of American jets flying over. And I turned to my friends, I said, "Good God, this is World War III. It started."
Here, you better take this. You know how to fire a carbine, sir? Just release the safety there and squeeze the trigger. It fires automatic till you stop firing.
I'm a lawyer from Denver, Colorado, Mike. I probably can't hit a thing.
Judas, how'd you ever get out here in a smelly ditch in Korea?
It's just what I've been asking myself.
It was a question that many young Americans would ask themselves. Early confidence in America's might evaporated in the face of the North Korean onslaught.
We were told that it was a light mop-up, and we got ambushed. We were driving down this road. We went over a little rice paddy bridge, and they let a few trucks go over the rice paddy bridge, and before you know it, all hell broke loose. The bridge was blowing up, and the trucks we were lined up and couldn't back out, so everybody just bailed out of the trucks, and there was machine gun fire, mortar fire. It was really hell, you know. I got hit by gunfire, and as I was laying in the ground later, I got hit by mortar fire, and shrapnel severed my spine.
Our dear old mother's heads are hanging low. Got our orders to Korea, we must go. So mothers, don't be sad.
Out of condition and outnumbered, American troops deployed from peacetime duty in nearby Japan were ill-prepared to stave off the communist advance.
We hoped and prayed this day would never come.
It was a grim time. We got newsreels, and they were grim shots of American boys on some little hills with names that no one could understand, near places that no one ever heard of. I mean, no one had ever heard of Seoul.
On the American home front, the swift reversal of fortunes in Korea aroused fears that for the first time in history, Americans might lose a war. Worse yet, they might lose a war to the communists.
We're all being pushed on this issue of the communists versus us. Are the communists 10 feet tall? Do they have some magic stuff that we don't have? Are they the wave of the future? Or has the West, I mean, and there are all kinds of writers who are writing, you know, has the West become decadent? And there was this covert fear that the very quality of our affluence, of our material excellence, would make us soft.
I'll give you odds. Kane's dead 5 minutes after Frank gets off the train.
With the American dream on the line, Hollywood gave people what they craved, a righteous hero who inhabited a world where good and evil were as simple as black and white.
The golden age of the Western, the American Western, was in those Cold War 1950s. High Noon, the good guy Gary Cooper, unsupported by the townspeople, who all hid under their beds, and he had to, as the Nietzschean superhero, go out and face the bad guys. And if not for him, the town would be taken over, the country would be dead, America is gone.
Our homes, our nation, all the things we believe in are in great danger. This danger has been created by the rulers of the Soviet Union.
Accused of being soft on communism, President Harry Truman was determined to hold the line in Korea. To do this, he needed a real-life hero. The victor of the war in the Pacific, General Douglas MacArthur, saw his wars in classical terms. He believed in fighting the enemy until they were utterly destroyed. For him, there was no substitute for victory. MacArthur sought victory by attempting the impossible, landing behind enemy lines at the seaport of Incheon. It was to be the greatest triumph of his long career. He took a town that everyone said could not be taken, and did it with very few dead or wounded. Following the general's battle plan, his troops swept inland, retaking the capital city of Seoul. On September 29, 1950, MacArthur arrived to restore the city to South Korean leader Syngman Rhee. MacArthur's orders were to destroy the retreating North Korean army. How far to pursue the enemy was left up to the general to decide.
He was the general. He was the man who knew. His was the master hand. He could do anything. And of course, he had this long background, which no one else could match. He'd been on the scene as a general for about 30 years. And he knew Asians to this extent. He did have a respect for them. And he had this grandiloquent view of America. I mean, MacArthur would have been a perfect chief of staff for Theodore Roosevelt.
Coming up next on the History Channel. As the Korean conflict reached its high point, Americans back home were ready for the promise of the good life.